Picture this. In the middle of a buzzing city, people rushing everywhere, eyes locked to their phones, Bluetooth calls echoing down sidewalks, everyone in some kind of hurry, trying to prove something, chasing something. But then there's one man, walking slowly, no phone in hand, no stress on his face, no rush in his step. He's dressed simply, nothing flashy. You wouldn't say he's rich, but you wouldn't say he's struggling either. He just looks free. And that freedom makes him stand out more than any designer suit or luxury watch ever could. While the crowd stresses about meetings, money, likes, and appearances, this man is moving to a different rhythm. He's not hustling. He's not selling himself. He's not chasing the ladder. And that's exactly what makes him dangerous. Not dangerous because he's hurting anyone, but dangerous because he's no longer plugged into the machine the rest of us are trapped in. He doesn't measure his worth by salary, followers, or LinkedIn titles. He doesn't care if you think he's successful, because he's not trying to impress you. He's not playing the game, because he's realized something most of us haven't. The game itself is rigged, and he chose to walk away. In a society obsessed with money, treating it like oxygen, anyone who decides not to chase it becomes a problem. Not because they're causing chaos, but because their very existence forces the rest of us to ask uncomfortable questions. Like, what if freedom isn't about what you can buy, but about what you no longer need? What if success isn't about accumulation, but liberation? What if this whole race is a trap? And that's the thing. The system doesn't want you asking those questions. It doesn't want you stepping off the track, because someone who doesn't want what it's selling, someone who's not buying into the hustle, is someone it can't control. Let's be honest. Most of what we call modern life is built not just on money, but on our need for it, on our fear of not having it, fear of being broke, of being irrelevant, of being judged. And every system we interact with, school, advertising, social media, even tech, isn't just offering you a product. They're offering you a story. That your value is based on your output. That your time only matters if someone's paying for it. That your worth can be monetized. That rest is laziness and burnout is ambition. Think back. How early were you taught that success equals income? That play is only valid if it becomes a career? That curiosity is cute, but credentials are what matter. It starts in school. Schools don't teach curiosity anymore. They teach obedience. They hand you off to a job. That job gives you a paycheck. And just like that, you're plugged in. Now here's the hard truth. If you don't need money, you're a bad customer. If you're content, you're bad for business. If you're self-sufficient, you're a glitch in the matrix. And society hates glitches. So they slap labels on you. Lazy, irresponsible, unambitious, broke. But those words aren't truth. They're tools. They're weapons, meant to push you back onto the hamster wheel, meant to make you run in circles chasing a carrot that was never meant to be caught. But what if the man who walks away from all of that isn't failing? What if he's the only one who's actually winning? What if not obsessing over money is a sign of wisdom, not weakness? Psychologist Erich Fromm once asked, if I am what I have, and what I have is lost, then who am I? The system doesn't want you asking that, but you have to. Because until you do, you're not really living. You're just earning. There's a huge difference between those two. Fromm didn't stop there. He also said, real wealth is not having more, it's needing less. And even more powerfully, the truly rich man is not the one who has much, but the one who is no longer controlled by the fear of not having. Let that sink in. Because most people don't chase money because they love it. They chase it because they're terrified of what happens without it. Terrified of looking like a failure, of being judged, of not keeping up. But the man who's not afraid of being broke because he knows who he is with or without a bank account is actually the richest one in the room. Henry David Thoreau figured this out a long time ago. Before iPhones, before social media, before 24/7 news. He walked away from all of it. Built a little cabin near Walden Pond, not to escape life, but to actually live it. People called him poor, but he wasn't. He had what he needed: food, shelter, time. Time to think, time to walk, time to write, time to be. And that right there is the one thing most millionaires still don't have: freedom. Thoreau didn't rage against the system. He just stepped outside of it. And from that distance, he could finally see clearly. See, the more you need, the more you can be owned. But the less you need, the less you can be bought. Fromm echoed that truth decades later. He said modern people aren't slaves to chains, they're slaves to consumption. We don't ask who we are, we only ask what we have. We don't search for meaning, we search for upgrades. Our identities, tied to our wallets, not our souls. But here's the radical shift. If you no longer fear poverty, you can no longer be bribed. You can't be manipulated with shiny things. You can't be silenced by scarcity. The person who doesn't fear being broke is the only one who's actually free. So let's go deeper. What actually happens inside the mind of someone who's not controlled by money? Someone who doesn't wake up every morning thinking, how do I climb higher? How do I earn more? How do I prove I matter? Here's what I've learned. They're not living to consume. They're living to feel, to be present, to create, to savor. Their joy doesn't come from buying things, it comes from moments, from a conversation that lingers, from silence that nourishes, from a walk with no destination, a book read slowly, a meal cooked with care. These are the kinds of riches no one can tax, sell, or turn into a product. They don't need to wear their value, because they are their value. They don't flaunt status symbols. They don't need to. They've stopped playing that game altogether. Their life isn't about owning. It's about being. And here's what's even more powerful. They've reclaimed something we all had once, but lost. The ability to wonder, to play, to be curious without a price tag attached. They've taken back their right to enjoy life without owning things, to belong without buying, to exist without performing. And that makes them dangerous. Quietly, deeply, unshakably dangerous. Because when your happiness no longer depends on the market, or the algorithm, or the next paycheck, you've become something this system fears. A person who cannot be manipulated. So, how do you actually live this way? How do you break free from the grip of money, status, and this endless loop of not enough? The truth is, we've already been given a blueprint. Thoreau showed us how to live with less. Fromm showed us why it matters. And no, it doesn't mean you need to live in the woods or renounce all modern life. It means you start by noticing, by simplifying, by unhooking. Start small, not just in your home, but in your mind. Start by looking at your life as a kind of spiritual audit. What are you spending money on that you don't actually need? Which of your wants were planted in you by advertising, not your soul? Ask, is this truly mine, or was I told I should want this? Then go even deeper. Define your non-negotiables, the things that matter more than any paycheck. Maybe it's your health, your creativity, your time with people you love, your freedom, your integrity. Whatever it is, name it. Write it down. Make it sacred, because once you know what can't be bought, you'll stop selling yourself to the highest bidder. Now, here's where the shift happens. You begin to invest, not in stocks or brands, but in your being. Learn something that lights you up. Spend time alone, not to isolate, but to reconnect. Make something with your hands. Read something slowly. Sit in silence. Reflect deeply. Because the truth is, you can't live freely if you don't know who you are. Becoming is not a side project. It's the main mission. And once you begin to reduce your dependence on money, not recklessly, not in a way that makes you irresponsible, but intentionally, you start to notice something. You trust yourself more than you trust the market. You live with money, not for it. And that shift, it starts to change. You stop compromising who you are for a little extra comfort or praise. And that's not deprivation, that's power. As Thoreau said, a man is rich in proportion to the number of things which he can afford to let alone. That's the kind of wealth no one talks about, but it's the kind that actually matters. Because when you let go of needing more, you begin to have more. When you clear the clutter, the noise, the endless wants, you create space. Space for stillness, space for depth, space for you. And that's where your real life begins. Now Fromm, he took this even further. He didn't just talk about possessions, he talked about identity. He warned us, society has hypnotized us into believing that to have is to be. Your car equals your status, your salary equals your intelligence, your possessions equals your worth. And in that kind of culture, you don't exist unless someone else sees it, unless someone likes it, unless someone validates it. But Fromm flipped the script. He said, true fulfillment comes not from having, but from being present, being free, being alive, being connected to yourself in a way that no one else has to understand. He called it the mode of being versus the mode of having. And that distinction is everything. When you live in the mode of having, you're always scared. Scared of losing what you've got. Scared of not being good enough. Scared of falling behind. You become possessive, anxious, insecure. Your self-worth rises and falls with your paycheck, your image, your performance. But when you live in the mode of being, you're grounded. You're enough. You don't need to prove anything. You can just exist, fully, deeply, peacefully. And here's the wild part. People who live this way, they're immune. Immune to ads, immune to status games, immune to peer pressure. Because their value isn't external, it's internal. They don't need to own the world to feel powerful. They just need to know themselves. That's where their wealth lives. So here's the real question. Are you living to accumulate, or are you living to become? Are you measuring your life by what you possess, or by who you are? Because when all the noise is stripped away, Fromm's truth hits hard. The person who chooses being over having is no longer a slave. And in a world where everything is for sale, that person becomes the rarest, the most powerful, and the most dangerous of all. Let's get real for a second. Money itself isn't the enemy. It's just a tool. It can build, it can feed, it can support, it can protect. But somewhere along the way, we stopped using money and started serving it. We made it the master, the measuring stick, the meaning. And that's where everything went sideways. Because the moment your freedom depends on your finances, it's not really freedom anymore. It's just another transaction. Think about how many people give away their time, their energy, their health, even their values for a paycheck. Not because they want to, but because they feel like they have no choice. They stay quiet in meetings to protect their job. They work in toxic environments for the illusion of security. They say yes to things their soul is screaming no to just to keep the money flowing. That's not wealth. That's quiet desperation. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop fearing the loss of money is the moment you become truly free. Free to speak the truth. Free to walk away from things that don't align. Free to build a life that's rooted in respect, not just survival. When you stop panicking about your bank account, you start asking bigger, braver questions like, does this align with who I really am? Am I building something I respect or just paying to stay afloat? Is this my life or someone else's blueprint? The system wants you to believe that money equals freedom, but it doesn't. Detachment from money is freedom. Mastery over your desires is freedom. The ability to say no without fear, that's freedom. So what does this actually look like in real life? What does it mean to not chase money? What makes a person truly independent, grounded, and unshakable in a world that profits off their anxiety? After diving into the wisdom of thinkers like Thoreau and Fromm, and after watching how the modern world constantly pulls us into striving and proving, I've realized something. There are 4 inner principles that set a person free, not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. These are the things that make someone untouchable in the best way. Freedom from artificial desire. We live in a culture that's engineered to make you feel like you're always missing something. Every ad, every scroll, every influencer, all designed to trigger a sense of lack. But the person who stops and questions that voice, that person is already halfway free. They ask simple, revolutionary questions like, do I actually want this? Or was I just told to want it? Would I still care about this if no one else saw it? That kind of awareness is power. Because once you break the spell of constant wanting, you stop running in circles. Value independence. Most people are living out values they never consciously chose. They believe what their parents believed, what their teachers taught, what society repeated. But when you stop and ask yourself, what really matters to me, everything changes. Because when you create your own definition of success, when you live by your own code, you become untouchable. Approval doesn't control you anymore. Trends don't sway you. You stop performing and start living. 3. Emotional self-reliance. In today's world, emotional dependence is disguised as normal. We look to likes for validation. We use entertainment to escape. We need constant input just to feel okay. But the person who can sit alone with their thoughts, who can feel peace in silence, who finds joy in presence rather than distraction, that person has a superpower. They're not relying on anything external to feel okay. Their joy isn't rented, it's theirs. They're not trying to escape themselves. They enjoy their own company. And that kind of emotional strength, it can't be marketed, it can't be bought, but it can change everything. 4. Social courage. This is the rarest one, because it means daring to live your truth, even when others don't get it. It's saying no to things people think you should want. It's walking a path others think is weird or risky or naive. It's being okay with judgment, with misunderstanding, with standing alone. Because when you stop living for approval and start living for truth, you become magnetic. People may not understand you, but they respect you. And secretly, they wish they had your courage. These 4 pillars, freedom from fake desires, independence of values, emotional self-reliance, and social courage, they form a foundation. A foundation for a life that cannot be bought. A life that can't be owned. A life that cannot be controlled. And in a system that survives by selling you a version of happiness that's always just out of reach. That kind of inner freedom is revolutionary. Let's not sugarcoat it. Choosing not to chase money comes with a cost. Not in the way people fear, not in hunger or actual poverty, but in perception. Society will misunderstand you. People will question you. They'll label you lazy, unmotivated, unambitious. Not because you are, but because you make them uncomfortable. You make them question their choices, their compromises, their constant chasing. They won't always say it out loud, but they'll feel it. You'll see it in their eyes when you tell them you chose simplicity over status, when you turned down a job that didn't feel right, when you left a career path that drained your soul. They won't understand, and that's okay, because what you're gaining is something they probably wouldn't believe. Time, not just empty hours, but yours. Clarity, the kind that only comes from slowing down. Presence, the kind that can't be bought or manufactured. Peace, the kind that doesn't depend on income, status, or applause. And most of all, freedom. Freedom to wake up without feeling behind. Freedom to create without pressure. Freedom to speak truthfully. Freedom to exist as you, without having to earn it. This kind of freedom, it's rare. And because it's rare, it's often misunderstood. Some people will drift away. Certain friendships might fade. Even your own family might worry. Have you lost your ambition? But they don't see what you see. They don't feel what you feel. Because this isn't a story of giving up. It's a story of finally starting. Starting to live a life that's actually yours. A life that feels honest, whole, grounded. And here's the paradox. When you stop needing money to prove your worth, your worth becomes obvious. You carry it with you. It shows up in your posture, in your voice, in the way you move through the world, calm, clear, unshaken. You stop bending yourself to fit into places you've outgrown. You stop trying to be someone in a system you've chosen to leave behind. That quiet confidence, that's the reward. That's the treasure at the end of the road less traveled. But here's why this path makes people uncomfortable. Why it shakes the very foundation of modern society. Because when you step off the treadmill, when you stop chasing, proving, performing, you're not just changing your life, you're challenging the whole system. Let's break that down. First, the economic system. Modern economies survive on endless consumption. You're expected to always want more, to upgrade, to spend, to stay unsatisfied. But a person who's content, who isn't buying the latest thing, they're a problem. You don't feed the machine. You don't fuel the market. You're economically useless to people who profit off your discontent. Second, the political system. Most political power is built on fear. Fear of scarcity, fear of losing status, fear of the unknown. But someone who isn't scared of being poor, clear, who doesn't need status or approval to feel safe, they're hard to control. You can't manipulate them with fear-based messaging. You can't bait them with promises of more. They think for themselves. They vote with clarity. They resist the pressure to conform. That kind of independence, it's terrifying to a system built on control. Third, the psychological impact. Your peace becomes a mirror. People see your calm and feel their chaos. They see your simplicity and feel their excess. They see your freedom and feel their chains. You're not judging them, but your life makes them question theirs. And that's uncomfortable. So they label you, try to pull you back in, mock your choices, call you unrealistic. Because if your way is valid, maybe theirs isn't. And that's a truth too heavy for most to carry. At the end of the day, society doesn't fear poverty. It fears independence. It fears the man who doesn't want what everyone else wants, who doesn't need to prove anything, who walks through the world not trying to take, but simply to be. And that kind of person, that's the rarest, most powerful, most dangerous kind of all. So how do you become that person? The one who isn't owned by money, who doesn't wake up in fear, who lives according to their own compass. Thoreau and Fromm didn't just diagnose the problem, they modeled. And no, it doesn't require you to live in the woods or become a monk. It starts with something far more subtle and far more powerful. You start by simplifying. Not just your possessions, but your mind. You start stripping away the noise, the distractions, the false obligations. You ask, why am I buying this? Why am I chasing this? Who told me this was important? Look at your spending, not just as a budget, but as a mirror. What does it reveal about what you've been taught to want? Then, you define your non-negotiables, the things that matter more than any dollar amount. Maybe it's honesty, maybe it's creativity, maybe it's time with your children, maybe it's your peace of mind. Write them down, protect them, build around them. Because once you know what you will not sell, your clarity becomes unshakable. Then begin to invest in your being. Not in brands, not in clout, in yourself. Learn something slowly. Make something with your hands. Take long walks. Read deeply. Get bored on purpose. Feel what your own mind sounds like when it's not being shouted over. Because the truth is, you can't live freely if you don't know who you are. And becoming yourself, it's not a hobby. It's the whole point. Finally, reduce your dependence on money. Not recklessly, but intentionally. You don't have to give everything up, but start needing less. Build your life around your values, not your income. That shift, even if it's small, starts to change everything. You stop living reactively. You stop compromising your soul for convenience. You start living with purpose, not price. And every time you do that, even a little, you become more whole, more awake. And yes, more dangerous to a system that needs you asleep. In the end, the man who doesn't chase money, he's not poor. He's powerful. He's not lacking ambition. He just redefined it. He's not behind. He's walking a road that most people are too afraid to take. He lives by his own rhythm. He works for meaning, not just for wages. He values depth more than display. And because of that, he can't be bribed. He can't be bought. And he sure as hell can't be broken. He doesn't need the system's approval because he's already found his own. Yes, people will misunderstand him. They'll call him lazy, unambitious, unrealistic, maybe even dangerous. And you know what? They're right, because in a culture that runs on insecurity, in a world that profits from your fear, in a system that depends on your obedience, a person who is content, a person who is free, a person who cannot be bought, is the most dangerous kind of human there is.